Hello and welcome back to Maple Flavored Yoga. My name is Andy and today's video is going to be a little bit different than other videos that I've posted. I'd like to introduce a new series where I discuss, or we discuss hopefully, some more theory and other background knowledge surrounding yoga, just to deepen and enrich the practice. Asana is a beautiful part of yoga, but it's only one of the 8 limbs. So I thought I'd introduce this, especially for new folks if they have any questions. I'm by no means an expert, but it is something that I've been learning and studying and reading on for almost a decade now. So I have some knowledge that I would like to share with other folks. If I get something wrong or if there's something that you've learned differently, I would love to hear from you. This is an open invitation to interact with these posts. I would like to learn as much from you as I can hopefully provide some information for other folks. So some people may or may not be aware that yoga is a thousands-year-old practice, approximately 5,000 years old. It was originally developed in northern India, and also I've been reading that there's parts of Egypt that it was developed in as well. So it's a very old practice. There are different types of yoga, as we know. With this, anything that's thousands of years old, there's different lineages throughout the yoga practice. So sometimes there might be slight variances on the way certain practices are done or different information. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I know when I first started and I was doing a lot of internet searches, the amount of information was very overwhelming and there were some variances. So I was getting really caught up on which one's correct? And ultimately they both are. They're both correct for that lineage of that practice. So that's just something to keep in mind. Keep an open mind with all of this type of stuff when you're reading different things. And what I can just say for me that I found was I would learn or read, and then I would decide what aligns most with me and my personal philosophy and the way I think about stuff. And that's kind of how I was guided into where I am now. I'm constantly still taking in information. I think it's very interesting and beautiful to see the differences of the different lineages. It just shows how rich and diverse yoga can be. Yoga is a holistic practice. I think particularly in the West, people think of yoga as asana or physical postures. And there's nothing wrong with asana. It's a beautiful practice, but yes, there's more to just moving your body. It's a body, mind, spiritual connection between the divine within you and the divine that is permeated throughout all living things that surround you, which is a really beautiful way of looking at things, in my opinion. When I think of the divine in me and the divine in all those around me, it really makes me question or be very aware of my intention and how I'm treating other people or animals or plants or anything like that, because we're all part of the same divine. So it's like we're all part of the same being. But yoga actually means unity or to yoke or to come together. So that's really what this is that connection between you and the divine. So that's all I'm going to say on that for now. I feel like that's a whole other video in and of itself. I know I've mentioned that there are 8 limbs of yoga before. At least in the type of yoga that I practice, there might be some variances on different types of yoga. So I'm just going to speak to what I've been taught and what I've learned through the years. So yes, I follow the 8-limb path of yoga. The first of the 8 limbs are the yamas, and they are also called the restraints. So this is kind of like a roadmap of how we want to treat others and ourselves. The first of these is ahimsa. Oh, I just want to preface all this by saying I acknowledge that I'm probably not pronouncing these Sanskrit words traditionally and properly. Sanskrit is a very complex language. I'm learning, I'm trying my best, but I just want to preface that this kind of video on how, yeah, I'm probably not pronouncing these things properly. Anyhow, getting back to it, so ahimsa is the first word, and that is the first word, the first of the yamas, and it means non-harming. So non-harming in action, thought, word to other people and ourselves. We have to remember that we can be really difficult and maybe a little harsh on ourselves. Number 2 is satya, and that is truthfulness. So truthfulness to other people and truthfulness to ourselves. Asteya is non-stealing, so that might seem pretty straightforward, like just don't take other people's things, sure. But it also can apply to certain things like people's time, their energy. So if you're showing up late for stuff all the time, that is one thing that I am always trying to be mindful of, is that I don't want to be taking up someone's time or their energy if I'm not willing to show up in the capacity that they require me to. Brahmacharya is number 4, and this can be considered abstinence. Some folks interpret this as not so literal, as being completely abstaining of any sexual activity. It's more of if and when you choose to share that, you do so in a meaningful and spiritual way. Okay, moving on, we have aparigraha, which is the last one. Oh, sorry, I'm bopping my mic here. The last one for the yamas, and it is non-hoarding. So we live in a world where we're constantly being bombarded by consume, consume, consume. And this is like the releasement of the attachment to material things. Yes, we need to have certain things in our lives to function, but if we're over consuming, if we're taking in more than we need, then that's not practicing aparigraha. So that's just the first limb of yoga. The next is the niyamas, which is self-discipline. So again, there's 5. The first one is saucha, which is cleanliness. Again, this can apply to, yes, your hygiene. It can apply to eating well to fuel your body. It also is clean thoughts. So having pure thoughts, not thinking bad things about other people, even though you're not saying it. So you're practicing ahimsa in some way, but you're not. So again, a lot of these things are like intermixed as well. So yeah, just trying to be clean in thoughts, practices, all that good stuff. Next up is santosha, contentment. Again, we live in a world that's always telling us you need more, you need this new gadget, all of that kind of stuff. But when we are content with what we have, when we're content in that moment, in that present moment, that's really practicing yoga in a really, really beautiful way. Because if you're not content with what you have, then it doesn't really matter how much you're going to consume. You're still not going to be happy or fulfilled. So practicing that contentment is a very powerful practice. Tapas, so this translates to the word heat, which kind of moves into discipline. So making sure that we're disciplined in our practice, that we're coming to practice yoga every day. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to do asana every day. It just means that you're practicing yoga and you're disciplined in the practice. Svadhyaya is self-knowledge. So I think through my yoga journey, this is one that I really feel that I've grown a lot in. Learning about yourself and how you function, what your soft spots are, your difficult areas, and having that knowledge so when you're moving through the world, you you have that emotional intelligence, you have that awareness, so you're equipped and you can be prepared to I don't want to necessarily say react, but you have tools in your tool belt to try and reduce negative impacts or cultivate positive ones, all of those things in your life. So, yeah. Ishvari Pranadhana. So, this is full surrender to the divine. So, divine, maybe you practice a religion, so that divine is God, maybe it's the universe, maybe it's just energy, whatever that is. Surrendering to the divine can be really difficult. I know it definitely is for me, but it's loosening that like grip on control of life. And sure, we have some control over our life, definitely, but there are so many things that are outside of our control. So when we release that grip, we're releasing that that forcefulness of things, and then we can just kind of put some trust into the universe or into God or whatever, insert the word that suits you best here. It's that acknowledgement that there are larger things in motion than us, and we have no control over that. So yeah, loosening that grip on control. So those are the first two. Now we're getting into asana. That's the third limb. A lot of folks are aware of asana. This is our physical postures, our yoga practice, our physical yoga practice. So I gotta fuzz him out. So our physical practice is a beautiful practice. It can be like a moving meditation. We want to have strong bodies to move us through the world, but the focus isn't on having a perfect pose or being super strong and pushing yourself beyond your limits. Traditionally, it was to move gently and freely. That's not to say that you aren't using your physical body and finding discomfort in that space, but if you're just focusing on handstands or getting some pose, that's taking away from the essence of yoga. Asanas also was created to make the body strong enough and get rid of extra energy so that we can sit in meditation. Next up is number 4, and that's pranayama. This is typically referred to as breath work, but if you break down the word prana, yama, so prana is life force energy and yama is control. So we're using breath as a tool to actually shift the life force energy or prana through our being. So that could be moving it through certain energy channels or chakras. So yeah, it's more than just breath work. One thing I really love about pranayama is you can do it pretty much anywhere. There's so many different types of pranayama, just as there's so many different types of yoga postures. There's a ton of different pranayama techniques that you can use depending on what you're trying to work on, or if you're feeling tired or cold or hot or out of balance. There's all these different types of techniques. So it's very great, and it's accessible all the time, and it's free. So there's that whole idea of like, it's accessible to you. You don't have to pay for it. You don't need to use anything super fancy. It's a really great way for you to connect with your parasympathetic nervous system, because our respiratory system is very closely linked with our cranial nerve, specifically our vagus nerve. So this triggers the body and the brain to move into that rest and digest, that parasympathetic nervous system. So yeah, lots of wonderful benefits to pranayama. Next is pratyahara. So that is sensory withdrawal. That can be as simple as closing your eyes when you are doing yoga. So what we're trying to accomplish here is our senses are typically made for us to like absorb our external environment. And we are being pulled externally all day long, right? We're at work, we're dealing with friends and family, we're driving, we're doing all these things that are require our external attention. So what pratyahara is wanting us to do is reduce those external sensory things and just shift them internally. So closing the eyes so we can shift the gaze inward. Really just tapping into that interoception to see what our experience is. What are we feeling? How is our energy today? Like all of those things. So, when we reduce some of that external noise, we can look inward and see kind of what's going on inside a little bit easier, hopefully. Number 6 is dharana, which is also called concentration. So we use that in our yoga classes, whether it's your drishti point, so that singular kind of focus on one point. But really, dharana is being present in the moment, trying to be focused on what you're doing at this very moment. And that can be really difficult. Again, all of these things are practices, and some days they might be easier than others. No matter how long you've been practicing, we have good and bad days. Some days we've got a lot of things on our mind. Some days we're really just like dialed in, and all of those experiences are valid and good. They're not always good. Like, we can have bad experiences because it's life, right? It's a spectrum of emotion. We're not always going to feel happy and lovely all the time, no matter how much yoga you practice. That's that misconception. So yeah, there's good days, there's bad days, and there's all those days in between. So dharana is really important. It kind of ties into meditation. So that's the next, I think that's why they're probably put so close to, they're put side by side in the limbs of yoga. So dharana and then dhyana. So dhyana is actually meditation. And I feel like these two are, it's kind of like brackish water, if you know what that is. So it's like brackish water is when you have salt water and fresh water, and they're meeting together. So there's a little bit of salt water and a little bit of fresh water, all kind of in the same area. So I was reading an article the other day about how meditation isn't really something that you do, it's just a place that you kind of end up. It's that very present, clear stillness that you can experience. It's been described as like your internal water being so flat, it's like glass. So, yeah. And then when that's so flat, it's like glass, it can become a mirror that we can gaze into for personal insight, all that good stuff. I know that might sound really difficult. And yeah, I hope that made sense. I'm trying my best here. I hope this is making sense. Anyhow, that's meditation. It's kind of like, it's like you're going for a drive, and then you end up in this peaceful spot, and you were like, oh, didn't mean to get here, but here I am. Cool. I can dig it. Nice. And also, when you're trying to do these things, the destination, I gotta get here, is working against you oftentimes. So just allowing yourself to be in that moment and enjoy that moment will allow you that space to maybe move into these other areas. But there's no guarantee. It's just like, it's releasing the attachment. That's that. Okay, the final limb is samadhi, and that is enlightenment. And enlightenment is, I think it's kind of similar to, like, you might find little bits of samadhi. There are some yogis that end up in samadhi where they're in a constant state of present, loving awareness, that they aren't living in the past or the future. They're fully present. Everything is done with love. There's no attachment to any outcomes. I don't know. I don't think I'm there yet. I'm definitely not. I'm definitely not. I don't think I'll ever get there. But there's been moments where, like, you'll get those little glimmers of it, and you're like, ooh, that's what that is. Cool. But yes, I don't anticipate myself ever being in that constant state of samadhi. But that's not why you do the practice, right? You do it because you want to be your best self. You want to be good for those around you. Yoga as a whole is just a really beautiful, holistic way of moving through this world and trying to better it, starting with yourself. Really just only focusing on, like, because you can't change anyone else. You can't make anyone else do anything, or, you can really just work on yourself. You are your own being. You get to decide how you do these things. Yoga that has so many different avenues of practice and theory and philosophy, but ultimately it's just like, be a good person. And also, there are obviously a lot of links between yoga and Hinduism and other religions, but anyone can practice yoga, because if you're Christian or Jewish, or like, it's not going against your religion, because it's not saying you have to worship another god or anything like that. And that's one of the things that I think is really beautiful about yoga, is that it is for everyone. I'm not necessarily going to speak to the nuance of all of that just yet. I don't know enough about it. There are a lot of factors at play when it comes to the practice of yoga, colonizing and gatekeeping and all of that stuff. That is something that I may try and dive into down the road. But yeah, those are definitely, I just want to acknowledge that those are factors into the practice. And I just want to, it's a hard thing to try and to navigate, definitely. But anyhow, if you're new to yoga, I hope this was helpful. Or even if you're not new to yoga, I hope this was helpful. I am open for any conversation people would like to have around these things. And so I just want to thank you so much for watching this video and listening to me ramble a little bit. But I just want you to know that wherever this life takes you, that you are seen, you are loved, and you are divine. Take care. Until next time.